Welcome, fight fans, to the WAAR Room with Chris, Eddie, and Melissa. It is an exciting day because last night was the third fight between Fury and Wilder. And oh boy, my boy Eddie is in the house. And Eddie, tell the people what you call this. You compared this fight to a what? A one-night stand?
Yeah. See, that we're recording this on the Sunday after the Saturday night that we thought when we're very tired and it was very late, and we thought it was really thrilling and memorable, much more memorable than it was. And now you wake up and it kind of dawned on me. It's like after something like that, a one-night stand, which goes way back into my ancient history. So this is a little, and I'm sure other people too, but this is a little thing that I wrote. This fight was like a one-night stand. When it's late and you're tired and maybe drunk, your standards deteriorate. You long for the climax as some sort of conquest or triumph. Then it happens, and for a wondrous moment, you feel like you've made it to Valhalla. Right after, though, you fall asleep, and when you awake, smelly and trying to become clear-headed, you finally say, grabbing your aching head, "What the fuck happened last night?" The euphoria had faded even before the effects of the liquor wore off, and now you must pull yourself together to face a new day. And now we're in the new day where we can more soberly evaluate what happened in this fight, the trilogy fight with Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, which certainly had a lot of twists and turns, ups and downs. It had a certain amount of drama, but you can watch some of these cheap action movies and see a lot of drama and back and forth in them too. And I think if you go back and watch this fight and don't pay too much attention to the announcing, whether you saw it on the American broadcast of Fox and ESPN or the British broadcast of BT Sport, and where everything, this is like the greatest thing since sliced bread. Look at the technique, and there were just so many mistakes, so many things below top level done by both fighters, which it did make it exciting in the moment because the outcome was in doubt. It was back and forth and back and forth. Wilder won the first round with the single shot jabs to the stomach. Fury didn't really know how to answer to the very end of the first round. The third round, you saw Fury come back and he got the big knockdown and looked like, okay, maybe what some of us said was going to be right. This fight was going to be over more quickly than in the other fight, but he couldn't fully put him away. And then the fourth round, of course, when we're expecting, okay, now Fury is going to finish him off, instead Wilder comes back. Fury was extremely sloppy, just sort of lumbering around, some cases his hands down, and he's open for one of Wilder's big right hands. And Wilder, who was the heaviest of his career, still hadn't run out of gas at that point, only in the fourth round. And he knocked down Fury. Fury was not really seriously hurt. He was hurt, but he wasn't out or unconscious. It wasn't like that 12th round knockdown in the first fight where he was out and then he arose. He got up and then he was knocked down again, and Wilder couldn't finish him off. And then in the fifth round, it appeared that maybe Fury won. It was a slower round as Wilder was starting to run out of gas. Fury was throwing a lot of punches in the sixth round. It still looked like he was lacking real power that he had in the previous fight. In the seventh round, Fury started to hurt Wilder, but Sugar Hill Stewart was upset at the lack of jabs. In between rounds, you could hear him say, "Jab the motherfucker, man," because Fury did the basic boxing. So from this point on, of course, Fury was winning everything. Wilder would land a couple of shots here and there. In the 10th round, Wilder was down again, but also again at the end of the round, he came back, but he was really tired. Both men were tired and extremely sloppy. Finally, in the 11th round, longer than at this point we expected it to go on, Fury knocked down Wilder. He went down, he was completely out and went down. The referee correctly immediately stopped it.
Right.
There were 5 knockdowns in the fight. Wilder was knocked down 3 times. Fury was knocked down 2 times. There were just not enough jabs, not enough movement. And yeah, it had that immediate excitement factor. But when you go back and look at it, this is clearly Fury's worst performance against Deontay Wilder, because in the first fight, he boxed and moved and was very fluid. And of course, he got caught, was knocked down twice, that dramatic 12th round knockdown where he got up and he came back to win the rest of the round. So Fury won probably 9, maybe 10 rounds of that fight. The second fight, Fury just marched forward on the front foot and dominated the whole fight and got the 7th round TKO. This was sort of a hybrid. It took Fury a while to adjust to Wilder, but he stopped just doing basic things, moving his head, throwing jabs, just boxing 101 type things. And I think because of the drama of the fight, a lot of people were just, wow, what a great fight. A lot of people saying this is arguing which was the best heavyweight fight since Joshua and Klitschko, since whenever, the best trilogy since Holyfield and Bo, the best fight since Foreman and Lyle. I'm hearing all these types of things. I don't think so. I think it had that, again, that immediate excitement factor, and that's why I compare it to a one-night stand. And when you wake up on Sunday, you just say,
What the fuck?
who the fuck was that? I gotta
Who
get
the
out of here.
fuck, right? Chewing your arm off.
Yes.
Oh, Melissa, what was your take on that fight last night?
Well, you know,
What
the
do you think?
drama to Eddie's point is just that our hearts were in our mouths because either man could have died in the ring. I mean, and that's the
Right,
reality.
right.
They're both huge. They both hit hard. And when they go down, they really go down. So that was part of it. Knowing that Wilder had been so seriously hurt in the second fight and then had fired Mark Breland after that fight for throwing in the towel. You know, there was that undercurrent that, you know, I'm going to go out on my sword and I may be dead, but I'm not going to have anybody stop this fight. So there was that pressure and that anxiety throughout. And that is, to me, what the drama was all about. I think Eddie's right. Fury was sloppy at best. I mean, he did sneak in some cute little uppercuts. I mean, every so often he would have flourishes of actual boxing. But and certainly, you know, from about the 4th or 5th round, his head was in it and really trying to defend and trying to win that battle. But his skills were appalling compared to the skill level we know he can be at. And, you know, he even admitted it at the end of the fight, saying, listen, this was not my best effort. I know it wasn't, but he did get the win. And he got the win in a war of attrition. And as I said, you know, to me in the later rounds, 9, 10, 11, as Wilder really was faltering, and it was, to my mind, just going on muscle memory more than anything else because he was out on his feet. Fury was starting to show some flurries of boxing. He was moving a little bit more, but still getting clocked, still with his hands down. And, you know, basically he was there to take Wilder's heart away, and he did. He beat him.
Did.
He beat him hard.
Do
That
you think
11th
that fight should have been stopped at round 8?
Well, certainly 9. But that wasn't going to happen. And even in the 10th round, after that knockdown, there was could have been a good reason to pull it at that time.
Mhm.
And in the 11th, when he went down, and he finally Wilder got back to his corner, you could see blood from his ears. He did go to the hospital. I mean, they didn't keep him overnight, so whatever damage was done, it was enough to let him go home. But
Right.
to my mind, I don't think Wilder should ever fight again. I think he should be done. He got his
You think he should retire?
multiple.
You don't
I
think he
think he
should
should be
fight
done.
Andy Ruiz or Joshua or
No, I
anybody?
think he needs to take his money and go home.
Start a
He's
new
Because the
almost
man,
36. He's going to be 36 in a couple of days. He just got really banged around and knocked out hard. He was clearly concussed much earlier in the
Yep.
fight
Mhm.
because he looked like he was almost sleepwalking. He had that look of somebody who was not entirely there, and he was able to survive because Fury couldn't really finish him properly. He had a dead man in front of him and he couldn't
And he said
dispose
took
of
him
him.
out, right?
So is he gonna fight again? This is not the smartest guy in the world, and wherever if he does fight again, he's gonna get a lot of money for himself and his family. So he's gonna have to make that decision in a while. He's obviously gonna
Right.
face a suspension. It'd be interesting to find out if
Who's
the
gonna
blood
face a suspension?
he'll get a medical suspension
Oh,
from
right, right, right,
for
right,
the knockout,
right.
but the blood from the ear, was that just something, a laceration on the outer part or just, inner part, or was that something more? Was there something else internally? We don't really know. It's too early, at least we don't know at this point. And I
Right.
think he's going to want to continue to fight. I mean, look at all these, Riddick Bowe wanted to come back and fight, Evander Holyfield. These guys just don't stop fighting until they're put in the grave.
Well, I
So
don't
I
think that should be his last fight. I think he needs to do one more fight and let that be his last fight. It shouldn't be against Fury.
well, they could
yeah,
have,
I mean, certainly he'll have options and he'll be able to make a lot of money. It won't be for a title because they're all, he's not going to fight Usyk. So, it'll be a contenders fight and whoever he
Oh,
ends
why
up
couldn't he?
fighting.
Why can't he fight Usyk?
Because Usyk is going to fight AJ, and then why should he fight Wilder?
No.
Why would he do that?
if Usyk beats Joshua again with his 3 belts, he's going to have 3 mandatories and none. Although now that he's no longer WBC champion, he could be ranked by some of these other outfits. But he's going to have his hands full with these mandatories after the rematch, assuming he isn't even stripped by one of them for having an immediate rematch. So I think you can make an argument today that the best boxer in the heavyweight division, based on what we've seen over the last few weeks, with one caveat, is Alexander Usyk.
Mm.
However, if he would fight Fury, he'd be, even if he came in as big as he did or a little bigger than he did in the fight with Joshua, he'd still be giving up about 50 pounds. And maybe Fury would come in lighter for that fight than he did with Wilder, but he'd still be giving up an enormous size advantage, both in terms of height and weight. Could he outbox him? It's certainly possible. But Usyk is also 34 already, and that fight with Joshua was his best fight. Is he starting to peak? We don't know the answer to all these different questions. And then we got boxing politics coming into play, because if Usyk fights Joshua again, they're talking in the first half of 2022. Okay, let's, for the sake of argument, let's assume that fight happens. What's Fury going to do in early 22? Is he going to fight his WBC mandatory Dillian White? Can he really get up for that fight? He should be able to defeat White, but we don't really know what's going to happen. There's just so many variables in all this. And we're dealing with a lot of guys that are in their 30s that have a lot of wear and tear on them. Where does a fighter like Joe Joyce come in, who has less wear and tear on him as a professional and is a WBO mandatory and is a very tough fighter? There's just so many variables in terms of what goes on. I mean, I don't expect Wilder's going to retire unless he's forced to retire. And even if one of the commissions like Nevada says you can't fight here anymore, he'll go to Florida, he'll go to Alabama, where he's from. He'll go somewhere, Saudi Arabia. He'll go somewhere and maybe they'll give him a relatively easy fight. Or so, who knows? Or maybe they'll make him an opponent for the PBC because they had a bunch of their up and coming fighters on the undercard of this show. There are a lot of different options. I just don't think he's smart enough to retire. I think Andre Ward was very smart to retire
Right.
when in his early 30s when he did. And even after taking some time off and coming back and realizing, I'm not going to get any better. I'm only going to get banged up even more. Very few people retire when they could, before they see the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know that Wilder is like that. And I don't know that Wilder even understands what happened, because he wouldn't. Fury went over to him afterwards in the corner after the fight and wanted to do the sort of pro forma, good fight, great fight, thanks, blah, blah, blah. He wouldn't even do that. And today the news reports say that his trainer, Malik Scott, said he's still mad at Fury for all of these conspiracy theory allegations about him. The man is not the brightest bulb in the pack, and that is going to lead to exploitation. And if he comes back next year, he's still marketable because he showed a tremendous amount of heart and courage by not quitting in this fight and fighting on several rounds after he was basically done and out on his feet, and even making some of them not completely, but relatively competitive. So he's still marketable to a certain segment of people who don't know shit about boxing. But
Maybe you can invite Jake Paul. But,
Oh, I know.
well, that's
Somebody
see,
ranked
those
fifth.
guys are around. Yeah, those guys are around too.
yeah, I mean, the thing was in the first round, Wilder with his jabs and, jabs to the body and looking strong. I mean, he had about one round where he attempted to box.
Right.
And
I
by
thought
the
he looked
second
good in
round,
that round. I said if he had kept that up the whole entire time, he might have given
but
Fury a run
it
for
would
his
have been a
money.
different battle because
Yeah.
Tyson Fury was not prepared, and it was clear that he was not prepared. He was
Right.
not in his peak training. He
Right.
even said it. He'd gone home. He's had COVID this summer. I mean, there's all these things,
Right.
and he was not peak
Yeah.
Tyson Fury in terms of his conditioning. More than that, his boxing conditioning. He was
Right.
obviously in shape enough. His brains never really left him.
Right.
And even in the 11th round, he was hopping. When he was throwing out his jab, he was hopping. He was jumping in, which is something Wilder had long lost. So Fury, had conditioning, had some deep conditioning that was still kicking in, although his boxing was sloppy. He was not on his game.
I mean, Wilder looked completely gassed.
Wilder was out from the
Completely
8th
gassed.
round. He was just asleep by
Right.
9-10. Forget about it. If he got shots off, it's muscle memory. Just like, yeah,
He
right.
had a lot of
he's
heart,
coming
though.
in.
That was a lot of heart.
Tremendous heart. Tremendous heart.
Because most people would have quit on the stool. I might have had to quit on the stool.
Fury referenced a couple of things that nobody really followed up upon. He said there was some problems in his training camp. I mean, everybody knew about it. He had the problem with his daughter was born and had to spend some time in the ICU. And then, of course, he had COVID. He also might have been training for a real long time because he thought at first, back in May or June or wherever it was, he was going to fight Joshua in August. Then he had to switch up. Then he was going to fight Wilder in July, then COVID. All of this stuff is kind of a disrupted training camp rather than just being isolated, not involved with anything, and you focus on your training for for 6-8 weeks or whatever you'd want to do. People really didn't follow up because the media just doesn't follow up on these things. And even in a lot of the post-fight interviews that I've read and post-fight analyses, I've seen these videos and read these articles, it's really not followed up upon. And in terms of being in shape, he was only something like 4 pounds heavier than when he fought Wilder the second time. But when he weighed in this time, he was wearing his sneakers and a hat, and so that accounted for a couple of pounds. But he also seemed to noticeably have more flare around his waist. So when he had COVID, when you get COVID, you get ill and things like this happen, you generally lose weight, and some of it is water and fat, but some of it is also muscle mass. So I don't know how much it takes a while to completely come back, and not everybody completely comes back. So, and as a man who is known for alcohol and drug abuse, that will hurt your ability to completely, fully, immediately recover from COVID. So these are some factors, but people are just celebrating. The media is just celebrating and repeating what the promoters said, the greatest heavyweight fight they've seen, blah, 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 blah.
And it was not.
We've all seen better. The other thing about Wilder, he kept touting, I can bench press 350 pounds, blah, 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 blah. So, he did come in very muscle bound. We all know, from the boxing side, that's not what you do when you train. You're not sitting there with heavy weights. So we don't know how locked up he really was from all of that weight training and what effect that had on his camp. So I think you're right, Eddie. There's not enough focus on those factors and what they were coming into the ring with. Obviously, Wilder did have a game plan of sorts, other than just I'll clock them with my right and they'll go to sleep. But he wasn't able to sustain it, and his trainer was not able to keep him on focus and on task. Pretty much by the third round,
he tried though. Malik tried. He told him, he was like, "Dude, you can't be out there being complacent and lazy."
No. And why is your hand down? And where's the phone? Where's the phone?
Exactly.
And this is sort of basic stuff.
Basic shit, right?
And so it was good that he was able to say all of that to Fury, but whether Fury it ever registered, I mean, frankly, even in the first round, he's just kind of weaving in and out. He didn't look right to me ever in that fight, Wilder, even with his very excellent first round where he was throwing jabs and trying to be controlled in what he was doing.
He needs to get that mental game.
Look right to me.
His mental game is fucked up.
But whose idea was it for him to put on all that weight and to come in all muscled up? That's related to Malik Scott.
Yeah, exactly. I think I agree that he might have, but should have done some strength training, which is different than adding muscle mass.
Pressing,
right? Adding muscle mass, because he does need to be able to push. I mean, come on, this is a heavyweight division where a guy who weighs 50 pounds more than you can step in the ring with you, which is not fair. I mean, Tyson Fury should be in his own. They should have a super heavyweight.
They should have a giant.
Right, the super heavyweight.
Well, the WBC wants that with the Bridger weight.
That's some bullshit.
224, which I think
it's not a fair fight, first of all. And if he had just focused on strength training instead of building muscle mass, he would have been.
It would have been better served.
Right.
Well, that's his trainer. That's also partially his trainer's fault.
That's his conditioning coach's fault. His conditioning coach should have told Malik, "Look, you can't build all this muscle and have him and think he's going to last for 12 rounds. It's not his
exactly right.
So you got to look at that's a mistake from bringing in a relatively inexperienced trainer. You weren't exactly bringing in Whitey Bimstein or Charlie Goldman or Gil Clancy or Angie Dundee or Emmanuel Stewart or somebody like that. You're bringing in a guy that's relatively new and just said, "Oh, you got to be stronger, and so we'll have you be bragging about your bench pressing." Weightlifting is an Olympic sport, at least for now anyway. It's a great sport on its own, but you don't see weightlifters competing and doing well on an elite level in combat sports, and vice versa. You don't see combat sports athletes competing in weightlifting and doing well on an elite level. They're different sports, they have different skills. So that's something that, but that's nothing new. I'm not saying anything
Right.
that any, if you know the slightest thing about boxing training, you should know that.
And it's absolutely the case. And to your point, Chris, yeah, conditioning is a whole other thing.
Right.
And doing some cross training while you're training for your boxing match is really
Recovery,
helpful.
sleeping, all of that counts.
All of that, but
Right.
diet, when you're eating, how you're eating,
Mhm.
when you're taking your protein. I mean, that's all very, very important. Even road work, not doing too much road work. All of those things affect conditioning. And that was, clearly Wilder's problem. His conditioning became suspect from, the middle rounds. It just wasn't there. He was on
Right.
fumes. And then he, when he was doing all of these punches, they were coming from, left field into right field. So he was really tremendous amount of energy every time he threw a punch, whether he landed it or not. And when he was landing it, it wasn't landing with the kind of force that it should have been landing in those later rounds, because
Right.
he was just so out of it. He wasn't putting himself in the kind of position that would allow him to use the momentum of his physical body and where he was placing his body as he's throwing those punches. In that sense, Fury, even though he was sloppy and everything else, he was using his body mechanics better.
He used his body as another damn fist. I mean,
well,
like,
yeah.
let me just lay on you. I mean,
Aside from all the laying on him,
I mean, damn.
those cute little uppercuts really were beautiful.
Oh yeah, he got
And
it.
they
But I don't
weren't.
know why Wilder wasn't throwing uppercuts like that. I was like, come on,
I don't
just
know.
throw something.
Because he's
He
not a
had no
good
reference.
boxer.
He's a
not a
terrible
top level
boxer.
boxer.
Right.
Always was a terrible boxer. He was a one-trick pony with a right hand that put people to sleep. And yeah, it's great that, listen, Mark Breland tried for years to train him. He knew he had a racehorse that, just is skittish and is only going to do one thing. And he worked as best as he could
and he got
within
by
those
on
parameters.
Just that right hand.
Yeah.
And Breland ends up getting fired and accused of sabotaging his effort.
Exactly. And Breland, was a great boxer himself. And it's not like he wasn't a fighter. He really knows what it is to be in the ring. He knows what it is to lose. He knows what it is to win. He has a real sensitivity to all of that and had worked with him for a very long time. So that was a tough breakup. Happens. Malik Stock comes in, tries to retool him a little, but Wilder,
he tried. Yeah,
by the third round, he wasn't
right
listening.
back to the same old shit.
Yep.
I got to add on another angle to this fight that hasn't really been covered yet. We've been discussing it, but hasn't really been covered yet too much in the United States. Are a lot of reports in the Irish media and now the British media about the continuing ties between Tyson Fury and Daniel Kinahan. And we're going to hopefully get something. We thought maybe we'd do something on it this week, but it was like too soon to arrange it. Plus, we really had to focus on the fight itself. But this is going to, with Fury now solidifying his position in people's minds as the number one heavyweight in the world. You can argue all that, but I think he's a consensus number one heavyweight in the world, regardless of whoever holds these different sanctioning body belts. There's going to be a lot more attention given to him. This fight was in Las Vegas. So these reports from Ireland and the UK are going to get more attention about him in terms of who Daniel Kinahan is, how the Irish courts have said that Kinahan is the key figure in the Kinahan organized crime group, which is an international consortium involved in all the wonderful things such as drug selling, gun running, money laundering, and all these other things. And this has been exposed time and time again. And the Kinahan say, oh, I'm not involved in boxing anymore. And then the next time the reports come out, he's negotiating the fights. He's a quote advisor, which, by the way, in American law, you have promoters and managers. You don't have an advisor. There's nothing, American law hasn't caught up with it. So now he not only apparently still has ties with Fury, but he's a quote advisor now to Terrence Crawford,
I know,
according
that's
to the
crazy.
media report. So
Mhm.
it's also surprise promoted by Top Rank. So there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that is very suspicious, and we're going to see if we can play some role in bringing more of that information to for people to understand. You could find all this stuff online. Just use our friend Dr. Google and look a lot of this stuff up, and you find a lot of these articles, and they're almost all in English too. So if you want to read real English from the Irish and British press rather than American English, you find a lot of this. So I think we have to look at that playing a role perhaps in the heavyweight division. And if it doesn't disrupt the fights, the authorities could start at some point looking at this, not the Nevada State Athletic Commission, but some other authorities at some point.
Well, the woman that we're gonna sit with, the author, her name is Nicola Talent, and she wrote a book called Clash of the Clans, and I'm reading that right now, and it is a page turner. And I'm like fearing for her life right now reading this book. It's like, so I look forward to having her on the show with us to discuss this. Maybe next week we'll get her in. All
Yeah,
right.
she also has her own podcast, Crime World, and she covers organized crime in general. But since Kinahan and his group is they're so prominent in it, she's focused a lot on that too. I mean, I've covered that on No Holds Barred when it's mentioned COVID. The first show that I did when I came back last year from having to take some time off to recover from COVID was with investigative reporter Declan Hill and focused on Kinahan. And we went through a lot of the history up to that time when Fury was publicly thanking Kinahan for arranging what we thought anyway would be the Fury Joshua fight. And that relationship still exists at this point. So lot going on, and some other people have in the US have covered it. Kurt Emhoff did some work on it. I think that was on his show at the time and Ring Magazine, but not too much. And I haven't seen any mention of it in all the
Well,
articles that I've read about this last fight. I haven't seen any mention of Kinahan.
no, they will scrub it as soon as it's mentioned. It will probably be scrubbed because they don't want to talk. They don't want anybody talking about this.
No,
No.
no,
So
they don't. This is, yeah,
yeah, but you
we're
guys
all
can
about
Nicola's
winning.
book, Clash of the Clans. It's good. So you guys pick that up. Uh,
Nicola Talent,
Nicola,
she's on
yeah,
Twitter and you can
talent.
look up
Yeah.
the book and all that.
Right.
Yeah, I got the book on Kindle, so I've been reading it on that since yesterday.
Yeah. It's
It's
good,
really,
right?
it's great. And, you know, especially in the United States, we think of the mafia as, the Godfather movies, but it's still alive and well. And very connected into money laundering around the world. And sports is a brilliant place to park your funds,
Yeah.
as we've seen it just in our coverage of AIBA and those problems. So why wouldn't it be in professional boxing?
Yeah, last week we did organized crime and rock 'em off and amateur boxing, and now we start to mention Kinahan and organized crime and professional boxing. Is there any other kind of boxing left? I don't think so.
No,
Probably not.
no, semi-pro.
Yeah. Whatever.
All right. So, Melissa, did we have any women's fights to cover this week?
Yeah, we did. We had a great fight last night in England on Matchroom. Shannon Courtenay, who is had been the WBA bantamweight title holder, came in 2.5 pounds overweight. So she left her belt on the scales.
Oh, ouch.
Ouch.
Does she get fined for that? She lose money
No,
too?
she didn't get fined. She just lost her belt.
Oh.
And she was fighting an American fighter named Jamie Harrison who beat her ass good to pick up the belt. She really did a beautiful job of pure boxing. You know, she's promoted by Brian Cohn, who has a lot of female boxers in the United States, including Callie Reese and some other champions. And she just boxed beautifully. If you can catch the fight on the DAZN website, or it may end up on YouTube, really worth watching. She did a beautiful job. Shannon Courtenay was, let's say, less than gracious at the close of that bout, claiming I won. Blah, 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 blah. Well, then she kind of backed down a little bit, but it was really a beautiful exhibition of boxing on actually what was a very nice card on Matchroom, including the Liam Smith fight. But I gotta say, she did a beautiful job. She brings the WBA belt back. Bantamweights are a really beautiful division right now. So there's some really great stuff. I'm told that there is going to be a rematch, which I was kind of surprised by, given that she lost the belt on the scales. I don't know why there would be a rematch, but I'm told the contract had called for one. So I guess the lawyers will have to take a look at that very carefully, whether there was a clause that said, hey, if you lost it before you ever fought because of weight, you'd have an issue. One thing that came out of this is she claimed that she was up 2.5 pounds because she started menstruating. So she had, you know, fluid weight. That a lot of female boxers are like, get the fuck out of here. But sorry, you should have known. No,
I mean, that's true. You do gain a couple pounds during your
but
cycle.
you also know when it's coming. So and 2.5 pounds is a lot of weight over there. So there's some controversy there, especially among women fighters going, I don't care. Don't talk to me about that.
They should have had a catch weight just because of the cycle shit.
Yeah, I mean, if you signed on the dotted line, that was your responsibility. I don't want to hear it. So, and then there's some reports. Well, maybe there were other issues at camp. Who cares? She lost. This young fighter who now, well, she's not that young. She's 36 years old, I think. She goes to 7-1 with this win, or 7-0-1. She had one draw, and brings the belt back to the United States. Right, so everybody's happy there. And, you know, we'll see if there is a rematch, whether that rematch is going to occur again in England. I will say there was some controversy on the scoring. One of the judges had it 95-95, and we're all like, I had it 97-93. The other scores are 96-94, 97-93. There were people that even had it, you know, 98-92. So we'll see, but that was really kind of exciting. And then we have some big boxing coming up. We've got a whole bunch of fights coming up. We have the first of the the junior welterweight fights that'll start to happen, trying to unify all the belts. So those are coming up in October. We've got Michaela Mayer is going to fight Hamadouche in November 5th to try to do the junior lightweight, junior lightweight unification. We hear Terry Harper's going to come back sooner rather than later. I'll also add that Tasha Jonas was supposed to also fight on yesterday's card in Liverpool, but again, there were issues finding opponents for her, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. I'll try to get some more information on it. But otherwise, a really exciting fight, worth watching with some good skills.
Outstanding, my beautiful people. Eddie, you have anything else for us you want to cover today?
I just want to add on a rare MMA note that coming up in a couple of weeks is going to be the final fight in the very storied career of the man that I still think is the greatest MMA fighter of all time, Fedor Emelianenko. And he's going to be having his retirement fight on Bellator coming up. The guy is way past his prime, but in the from the first decade of the 2000s, this guy was such a complete fighter for MMA. He could box, he had power, he could grapple and wrestle. He had submissions. He applied a lot of the tools of combat sambo very successfully and had a 10-year unbeaten streak in a sport where it's much more difficult to go unbeaten than it is in boxing, because you have fewer rounds and there are more ways to win. And yet after about 2010, 2011, he really started fading. And right now he's sort of a hero in Russia. But you might want to, just for old time's sake, catch his last fight in Bellator and maybe watch some of his early fights. And also, unlike most other MMA fighters, he really comes off with humility and respect. And I've interviewed him a number of times, and where a lot of these other people sound like they're at a Donald Trump rally or something, he does not. So I actually have a little clip. Maybe we could run it briefly next week, a short clip of a media interview that about his legacy that we could run on the show, just to sort of pay respects to him. And also, I don't know, has it been finalized when the Teofimo Lopez Cambosis fight is next? I know that's gone back to Matchroom, but we should look if there's a specific date and venue on that. I'm not sure if they've actually worked out all the details on that, but that's going to be interesting to see how all the crap with the Triller clowns has affected Teofimo Lopez, how sharp he is, having sat out about a year till he fights a guy that he's widely expected to defeat. And then also at the end of the month, I think Clarissa Shields, to make that crossover situation again, is going to be fighting her second MMA fight. So we'll see what happens with that. And before the end of the year, she wants to box again. So we'll see whether her appearances in MMA have built up some more support among these promoters and networks to put her back in the boxing ring, which is really where she belongs.
Right. I agree. All right. Well, I think that about covers everything for Fight Week, October 10th, right here in the War Room. We have a new website, guys, coming up. So, you guys, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications. Eddie, you want to tell the people where they can find you?
Yeah, you could. I put like a new picture up, but I might make a bigger one. That one's from a few years ago. My website is eddiegoldman.com. You can go to my patreon.com/Eddie Goldman, where I have a lot of premium stuff where you could subscribe to, and Twitter at NHB News. And you'll sometimes see me roaming around New York City, but not as much these days until the pandemic really is pretty much finished. Yep.
All right. All right, Melissa, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, cool. So on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Girl Boxing Now. Certainly post with some regularity. Then I have a website, girlboxing.org. Do check it out. I have lots of links, including to my book, A History of Women's Boxing. And some mornings of the week, working out at Gleason's gym.
That's right. I see you over there. I'm gonna come to New York so we can spar.
Oh, I'd love it.
That's right. Let's do it. All right, my beautiful people. This is your fight goddess. I'm in Los Angeles and on Twitter at Angry Afro Radio. Angry Afro Radio. You guys have a fantastic day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.